Edtech Mondays Kenya is supported by the MasterCard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning in partnership with Edtech East Africa.
Hello, welcome to Edtech Mondays Kenya. My name is Moses Kemibaro, your host and moderator for the Kenya edition. This month we'll look at widening access to ICT infrastructure and connectivity in Kenya. Since the start of 2023, Edtech Mondays Kenya has explored a range of conversations such as mainstreaming hybrid models of learning, improving foundational literacy and numeracy for young learners, and most recently, the role of digital literacy as a crucial component of 21st century skills. Throughout our conversations, the lack of ICT infrastructure and connectivity, such as electricity, internet access, Wi-Fi networks, and mobile networks was a key discussion area on what is needed to make technology-enabled education accessible to all learners in Kenya. Even though all 47 counties in Kenya have fiber-based connectivity, last-mile links to rural parts of sub-counties remain inadequate. The 2019 census report also showed that rural internet access was 13.7% compared to urban internet access, which was 42.5%, more than thrice that in rural areas. Although the COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated that technology-enabled education is possible, when schools closed in 2020, many marginalized and rural learners did not benefit due to the inadequate ICT infrastructure and connectivity, as well as the high cost for access. In today's conversation, we'll take a deep dive with our panelists into the current state of ICT infrastructure and connectivity in Kenya for education to better understand where we are and what needs to happen to close the digital divide for all learners. As we explore the widening access to internet, ICT infrastructure and connectivity in Kenya, to those watching we ask, what can be done to improve access to ICT infrastructure for connectivity for schools in Kenya? Please share your thoughts with us on Twitter using the hashtag EdTechMondays. I'm delighted to introduce our panel for today. Rose Wanjohi, Principal Programs Officer at the ICT Authority, Ben Roberts, Group Chief Technology and Innovation Officer at Liquid Intelligent Technologies, and Dr. Tim Kelly, Lead Digital Development Policy Specialist at the World Bank. Our sign language interpreter is Rose Omollo. So I'll start off with you, Tim. Thank you very much for joining us today. The Kenya Digital Economy Acceleration Project, KDIP, aims to expand access to high-speed internet, improve the quality and delivery of education and selected government services, and also build skills for the regional digital economy. Please explain exactly what the KDIP is and how it will reduce the digital divide for marginalized and rural learners and connect the last mile to schools in Kenya. Also, how will the KDIP also work with the private sector to make all this possible?
So the Kenya Digital Economy Acceleration Programme, or KDIP as we say for short, is a new World Bank credit to the government of Kenya. It was approved by the World Bank Board in March of this year, 2023. And it's in two phases. The first phase, which starts right now, has a focus on the education sector, and it's investing $390 million in support to the education sector, to government services, and also to digital skills in Kenya. The second phase, which will begin in 2026, is a further $180 million, and that will focus on the health sector. But we're planning to work with the government, in particular the ICT Authority, to help the government achieve its goals of building out 100,000 kilometres of new fibre optic cable, the so-called digital superhighway. And in order to do that, we'll be working with the private sector to lay the cable, to design the best routes, to optimize the technology, to serve eventually all schools in Kenya.
Rose, thank you very much for joining us today. I'd like to ask you, when it comes to the ICT Authority, as well as the Ministry of Information Communications and Digital Economy, you're working closely with strategic partners to enable education through technology for all learners throughout Kenya. What initiatives have been put in place already, and what sort of results have been achieved thus far? And also, what are the key learnings at this stage, and what could be the possible next steps?
The Ministry of ICT, or the Ministry of Information Communication and the Digital Economy, has several initiatives that they are carrying out through the ICT Authority. Like Tim has mentioned, the first one that we are just about to roll out is the digital superhighway with different partners. We want to lay 100,000 kilometers of fiber in addition to what we already have, which is around 9,000. in addition to that, we did digital literacy training, which is part of the competencies of the CBC program. We've also had initiatives around connecting schools with partners like UNICEF, UNESCO, and Huawei, where we've seen around 300 primary schools connected to the internet, and the conversation is going on to have more schools connected to the internet. Through the connectivity, we've seen a lot of collaboration, especially in teaching and learning for both teachers and learners, where we've seen teachers prepare their own content for teaching their pupils with availability of the internet and everything.
Ben, how are you?
Very good, thanks.
Thank you for joining us today. Liquid Intelligent Technologies, the organization that you represent here today, has been part of Kenya's digital transformation for a while now. And I think as a provider of basic and also advanced ICT infrastructure and connectivity, with education at the heart of your mandate, that's been one of the key components of how you've been rolling out your network in the country. You've been involved in many initiatives, again, trying to close that digital divide. I know a lot of educational programs that you've been involved in, trying to give learners access to this infrastructure, which has been sparse and unreliable throughout the country. Can you share some of the success stories that you've had, as Liquid, in terms of connecting schools to the last mile, and also the measures that you've taken to make sure that this actually achieves the results? And also, ultimately, what do you also see Liquid doing going forward in this respect?
We've built out a large network across all of Africa, and I actually have built 100,000 kilometers of fiber, albeit in a few countries. But in Kenya, we have about 10,000 kilometers, and we bought a company that built out one of the biggest networks here, and we've made some good expansions as well. But in every country where we operate, we actually find that the academic sector from the university side is really one of the biggest users on our network. So the big users of fiber that we have is the mobile networks. They use our fiber, the banks and all their branches and retail. But that academic sector, the universities, is always in the sort of top 5 of our customers in any country we work. Kenya is no exception. So the university network here, KDIP, they use our fiber for 80% of the university connections. Now, in the countries where we operate, on the other side, there's a big gap when it comes to schools. So I have been really focused on this, and Liquid, I've mapped 250,000 schools in the countries where we are operating. And we've connected about 5,000 in those countries. But actually, not many, maybe total 10,000 in those countries have actually been connected. So there's a huge gap. It's been about 5 years since we did that first USF project, and we've got quite a lot of learnings about what has worked and what has not worked. But what has impressed me, particularly in the pandemic, those schools that had connectivity and the teachers we work with, we have a WhatsApp group with all the teachers, ICT teachers, and actually seeing a lot of the innovation from the teachers and creating their own content, setting up their own virtual classrooms, and even we know some teachers who are in Bungoma who started building their own network. So they have one link at a school we provided, and they've put up a mast there and started to put radio connections to other schools. So the demand is there, and I do think it's a case of giving connectivity is going to create some kind of bottom-up initiative, and I think it's a result of building on the efforts that Kenya has done with the tablets and with the rolling out of electrical power. Kenya is very well placed to really expand connectivity in schools.
That's great to hear. And I think maybe the next question for you, Tim, which is quite relevant to that, I think is the question of sustainability, right? How do we make sure that these initiatives for sort of ICT infrastructure and the connectivity actually can keep running? And I think for us, we'd like to understand a little bit more about how KDIP is going to do this for schools, connecting the internet, also working with the private sector with players like Liquid to make sure these connections are accessible. Because we also know there are cases where the infrastructure was deployed but was not sustainable due to basic things like electricity or actually being able to pay for that internet connectivity. So I'd like to understand maybe from your perspective how KDIP is going to close the loop to make that something that we can actually look at as being a problem of the past?
Yeah, well, there's no shortage of pilots in Kenya. There have been many pilot schemes. I think Ben mentioned a few run by the Universal Service Fund, the Digital Literacy Programme, the GIGA initiative between UNICEF. And they're really tackling the problem of connectivity, how to ensure that the schools in rural areas in particular have good connectivity. But the next step in the problem is to make sure that the internet is affordable to those schools. Typically, schools receive a very limited amount of money per student from the government, and that logically has to go to things like textbooks, meals, etc. School buildings. It doesn't necessarily, or it shouldn't necessarily, go to connectivity. So under the Kenya Digital Economy Acceleration Programme, what we're trying to do is to prepay the cost of internet access over 10 to 15 years into the future, providing a certain minimum level of connectivity for schools, whether it be 10, 20 megabits per second. Obviously for universities and TVETs much higher. But by prepaying that internet capacity, you take away the problem of how you pay for next month's bills. And once you take away the sort of psychological problem of how you pay for the bills, it gives teachers and it gives students the ability to innovate, to experiment, and that's how you really learn. You really learn the internet by trial and error, by working out what works and what you can do. And if you take away the problem of how to pay for it, then you really encourage innovation.
Hey, that's fantastic. And I think it's such a critical piece because obviously that sustainability piece, 10 to 15 years will mean that, for the long term, we'll find opportunities to keep this going. But also down the road, the commercial players might find a fertile market in place in terms of allowing you to now commercialize opportunities on the ground later, isn't it, Tim?
Yeah, that's what we hope. I mean, we see that, particularly when you come to rural areas, right, the school is the sort of point of interest you'd want to connect to in many rural communities. We have a lot of corporate customers, but if you go to a village somewhere in Kenya, you find there isn't a bank branch. There might be a petrol station, but there might not be one of the big chains. But those corporate customers we have, they're not yet there yet, right? But in that village, there'll be 6, 7, 8 schools. Some primaries, secondary, boys' secondary, mixed. So there's actually quite a lot, and we think by connecting them, then the demand within the community will arise. Where I think some of the pilots that Tim mentioned have perhaps not got the best economy of scale is by picking dots in a map. So if you say, let's go to a particular area and we'll pick 1 or 2 schools in a particular county or sub-county. Whereas if you go to an area and you say, let's connect every single school in the county, you'll actually do it more efficiently. You'll find that the network you build, you're going to build it resiliently, you're going to have a more efficient use of the resources, and even if people are there to repair it and stuff, it'll work better by doing it at a larger scale. I think that's what we anticipate that Kenya's ready for.
Rose, I'd like to come back to you. Kenya Power connected over 22,000 schools with electricity in early 22. And at the same time, we see that the reality is that many schools still lack access to affordable and consistently reliable electricity, which of course is essential for programs like the DLP, the Digital Literacy Program that has been rolled out. So from this perspective, what steps are being taken to ensure that schools in all parts of Kenya have access to electricity so that learners can really benefit from all these technologies and access to the internet?
I think we have a provision through the free primary education for utility bills, where I think the internet is given per child, and also for power bills. Secondly, I think we have ongoing conversations with different government institutions on how power can be made affordable to most of the learning institutions, because I think for us to have our infrastructure fully running, we have to have available power, whether it is from the grid or from the solar. We have to so those conversations are ongoing so that we make it that every school can have access to power and also have access to the the ICT infrastructure can be up and running every now and then because of the available power.
So I'd like to come back to you, Ben. Thank you so much again. Maybe just to expound a little bit on your previous point, the cost of obviously rolling out ICT infrastructure and connectivity in parts of the country that are rural or semi-arid is clearly very expensive. And I'm wondering how you are able as an organization to do this more cost effectively, how you're able to work with partners like the government and the World Bank to make this a reality. How does, as an organization, Liquid do this and make sure that this actually makes sense in the long term for the organization?
Yeah, so lots of different ways, but we use a mix of technologies for starters. So predominantly, we're known for having a large fiber network, but we do use wireless networks for connectivity at the last mile, and also satellites, right? So we do, and even the ones we've connected in Kenya, a large number on satellite connectivity. There's a lot of innovation going on in that space too. So there's that side of it, mix of technologies. We use the right technology where appropriate. And then as well, work with those complementary infrastructure owners, power companies, power grid companies. In particular, we find those as being the best partners, because we have had struggles in many places working with special fiber projects done by the government, just because they've not always put in the right service quality to maintain the uptime.
Okay.
Whereas the least power companies, it's part of the service level agreement of the power company. If they don't provide power, they don't get paid as well. So
yes,
they have an incentive to go and repair. So they repair the fiber. So we use their those wayleaves and power cable connections quite extensively. We're really looking at ways to drive down the efficiency, and we even bought our own. Liquid invested in our own vendor of wireless technology. So we bought a company from Israel called Telrad who make wireless last mile equipment. So we're looking at actually how we can, we own the whole technology stack in this space.
Fantastic. Tim, in the May edition, which is today's, we discussed the critical role that digital literacy plays in empowering young people when it comes to their participation in the global economy. And on this basis, we'd like to understand, how does the KDIP project or program will contribute to digital literacy and skills and the development of the youth in Kenya?
I think the best investment that any country or any government can make is in its young people. And through the KDIP project, we are targeting especially digital skills, both inside the classroom and outside the classroom. So in terms of school-age children, we're helping to extend the digital literacy program to junior secondary schools. So at the moment it serves primary schools. We're extending it to junior secondary schools. And also outside of the classroom, we're supporting the government in both the delivery of advanced digital skills through incubators, accelerators, etc., and also through the Open University of Kenya to provide online digital content, not only to Kenya, but also to students across the region.
So as we conclude our conversation, I think I'd like to hear maybe your final remarks on what is needed to create high quality ICT infrastructure and connectivity in Kenya for all learners, schools and other stakeholders, and more importantly to realize the right education outcomes that we see as being important to Kenya. And maybe we can start off with you, Rose, from that perspective.
I think we'd have to have more public-private partnerships, chipping in different areas where we can, if our strength is connectivity, we can have a CSR on connecting a school. Even as individuals or corporates, we can complement what the government is doing, even through our old school or alumnus associations. You can complement by coming up together and saying that you are going to connect your former school with internet or pay for the bills for a particular period of time. And if we continue that way, I think we'll have more schools connected to the internet and more pupils enjoying the technology like their adults or parents are enjoying from the comfort of their homes.
What about you, Ben?
I think we're going to see a disruption in education from what is going on right now to what is going to happen in the future. And we talk a lot about the money being spent and the budgets. You know, the money being spent on textbooks in Kenya is quite astronomical and is way more. If you take the annual textbook budget and spend on the internet, we'll get it done very, very quickly. So I think it's going to be a shift in traditional spending from education departments into, you know, what is the spending of the future. And when you have full end-to-end working access, right? So when I say access, it's the combination of connectivity, electrical power, having the computer, being allowed to go into the computer room and use the computer. But when we have that access in schools, we're going to see the way learning changes completely. I think as we manage that transition, I don't think there's going to be a funding problem.
Especially now the demand will be there, given the fact that everything is in place to do so.
It's just going to be moving from where it's being spent right now, you know, to what's becoming. So textbooks are a necessity right now, and then maybe it's been seen that you connected electricity, that might be seen as a luxury, but that's not going to be the case. You know, textbooks will be a thing of the past, and electricity and the computers and the connectivity are going to be the essential items. And these things, you know, whatever budget's been spent there is going to shift over here.
Absolutely, I think that's definitely going to happen. And finally, Tim, maybe your final remarks, again, thinking back to what is possible for ICT infrastructure and connectivity, and also specifically how the KDIP project is going to impact this.
Yeah, so 3 big challenges: availability, accessibility, and affordability. So ensuring that ICT and digital services are available throughout Kenya with high-performance internet. Secondly, accessibility, ensuring that Kenyans have the right skills to use those services, particularly those with disability or particularly those in rural areas. And then finally, affordability, making sure that internet services are affordable in schools and to the extent possible, taking away the monthly fees that maybe keep headmasters awake at night of how they're going to pay them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. We appreciate having you on this panel today for Edtech Mondays Kenya. For today's on-the-ground stories, we feature iMlango, a comprehensive Edtech initiative rolled out in 2015 to improve learning outcomes for learners by providing last-mile connectivity to schools in rural and semi-urban settings. We visited Kaloleni Primary School, one such beneficiary, to learn about how the project has impacted their learning and teaching outcomes.
iMlango is an educational technology program that aims to improve the learning outcomes of Kenyan children, mostly the ones who live in marginalized areas.
The iMlango provided 25 laptops. There was a projector, there were some chairs, and then they inducted teachers concerning the digital learning. Then children and the teachers embraced the program.
Most of the learners now, they know how to browse, and also they know how to hold these mounts and also touch pads. So ICT has really make these learners to acquire ICT skills. So has improved learning in our school and then also in mathematics.
We noticed an improvement in the maths and literacy for the pupils. Over the course of the project, when the evaluation was done at the end, we noticed that the children had improved. We also had interviews with the children themselves and even the teachers, and the children did say that they enjoy the online lessons a lot, because it's not the same as the traditional lesson where the teacher will be at the front and give a lecture.
Our main challenge here is maintenance. Actually, we have the desktop, in total they are 25, but only 3 which are working. The laptops, we have 16, and for now, 12 are working.
The electricity we are talking about, sometimes it goes on and off, such that we could say if we had like solar panels, they could assist in that area, because it's a challenge If electricity goes for about a week, then you find that our children are not learning, and those lessons are forgone. Again, it's the room. We have provided a room for those computers, but because the number is swelling, the interest, the children who have interest in the same, and also teachers, then the room is small, such that it cannot accommodate a class of about 40, about 50.
We give remote support whenever there are any issues, but the day-to-day running of the lab and the maintenance is on the school. And so what head teachers have done is they called the parents and they told them that now here we have a lab which we were given by Avanti for free, but it is upon us to maintain it.
I had to call the parents, we discussed, and we talked of maybe per term a child can pay 30 shillings or 90, so that we can pay for electricity and also Wi-Fi, but also the Wi-Fi sometimes we get it free from the Avanti, and also to maintain the room.
Thank you all for watching this edition. Follow more of these conversations on the MasterCard Foundation YouTube channel and the Young Africa Works Facebook page. My name is Moses Kemibaro. See you again on the next edition of Edtech Mondays Kenya. Thank you.
Edtech Mondays Kenya is supported by the MasterCard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning in partnership with Edtech East Africa.